Wallahi, if they were to give me the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left hand, wallahi, I could not give up this message until I succeed in what I'm doing, or I die a death in this path preaching what I am preaching.
There are signs. There are things that would indicate to you whether that person is speaking the truth or not. And that's exactly what we believe that God has given to His messengers. God has given to His messengers. Right? He has given them signs. They were given things that when a person sees them and they study them and they look at them, they know that these are indications that that person must be speaking the truth and they must be truly what they claim to be. It's interesting that C.S. Lewis, he gave a criterion. He said something which, as a principle of analysis, we Muslims happily accept. But we don't accept his premise, and I'll tell you why. But he said concerning Jesus, he said that either Jesus, and he said this in respect to his belief that Jesus is the Son of God, and presumably that Jesus is God, that either Jesus was a liar, or he was deluded, he was mad, he was a madman, or he was speaking the truth. And he says, well, if you look at the life of Jesus and what Jesus said and how he behaved, you can eliminate those. You can say, well, he wasn't a liar and he wasn't mad, so he must have been speaking the truth. There is, of course, another possibility. The other possibility is that what has been taught to you about Jesus is not true. And the things that you claim he said, he never actually said. I just say that because although I actually accept the basic argument, I don't accept his conclusions for that extra reason. But let's just say, it's actually a totally valid analysis to make of any claim of any individual. Anything anyone claims, anyone makes a claim, they could be lying. Lying means they are purposefully trying to deceive you. They know very well that what they're saying is untrue, but they are lying. They are purposely trying to deceive you. That's one possibility. And this, of course, applies to anyone claiming prophethood. I know what God says. I know God's telling me why you're here, what the purpose of life is, where you're going to go after you die. I know. How do you know? God told me. So you can analyze. Is he truthful? Is he a liar? Is he deluded? And each different person will display different characteristics. The liar, and as I'm sure you probably, most of us learned, I don't know, I learned that in my life, right? I learned that usually a lie leads to another lie, which leads to another lie, and then you have to lie to cover up the lie that came before. And you know, you could be a good liar, maybe you could go for quite a long time, but sooner or later, the pack of cards of lies just collapses around you. Because you just have to keep on making up lies to cover up. I think most of us hopefully learned that when we were kids, right? Similarly, a deluded person. Now what's the difference? A deluded person is saying something untrue, but they really genuinely believe it. That's different. You see, the person who is deluded is sincere. They actually really believe it. So they could display some of the characteristics of a truthful person, right? But actually they are either, maybe a devil or a spirit is telling them, or they have some psychological problem or whatever. They truly believe that they are receiving revelation from God, but indeed, in one way or another, they are just suffering from a delusion. And I'm sure you can understand, therefore, that the characteristic of that person is very different from the liar. Very different. But there are still ways that you can identify that. The third option, as long as we agree that what we are hearing and observing about this person is accurate, then the third and only third option is that that person is speaking the truth. Now it's very interesting, because if we can apply this criterion to any man who comes along and claims that he is receiving revelation from God, that he is a prophet, and I'm asking you now to make an analysis, to look at the Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him, in the light of these three things. Just these three things. Was he truthful? Was he deluded? Or was he a liar? You could do that by reading his life. First of all, it's very interesting that, of course, there is a long history of polemic against Islam. There is a long history, started with Saint John, I probably wouldn't like to call him a saint actually, but John of Damascus, who wrote the first polemical work against Islam. And he said some pretty absurd things, including claiming that the Prophet Muhammad died by being attacked by a group of pigs. That's what he actually claimed in his writings. And he pretty much set the standard for quite a few Christian writers after his time, making pretty absurd accusations. And of course his claim is that Muhammad was a liar. Why did he say this? And why, by the way, almost entirely, and I wouldn't say everyone, the Reverend Boswell, for example, is an exception, and there are others who take a different view today, but I mean historically, probably up until 100 and 150 years ago, almost without exception, most Christian writers accused the Prophet Muhammad of being a liar. The reason they did that is very simple. Any Christian or Jew who opens the Quran and reads the life of the Prophet Muhammad will be struck by how much consistency and similarity there is between what the Quran says, what the Prophet taught, and what they know from their own religion and scriptures. In fact, some of these things are very detailed matters of theology and philosophy, religious philosophy and law. In fact, some early Christians thought that Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, was actually a bishop, a former bishop. That is the level of information they recognized, because they have to explain, where did Muhammad get all this information? Where did he learn about heaven and paradise and the hellfire and Moses and Jesus and Abraham and Noah and the detailed dietary laws and so on? Where did he get this information from? Well, he must have learnt it from a priest, from a rabbi, from this and that, and then he must have what? Made it up and invented it and made this religion together. That's the only way they could explain, and still obviously not agree that Islam was the truth, by saying, well, he must be a lie, he must have invented it.
There's always a motive behind lying, right? Now, somebody is lying, they want money, they want wealth, they want women, status, political power, something. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, his message was so diametrically opposed to the fabric of society at the time. The society at the time was a Meccan society. They lived off trade. They had idols from all over Arabia that used to come to the Kaaba, and this was their source of income, the pilgrimage to the house. And what he was essentially saying was, La ilaha illallah, there is none worthy of worship except the one creator, and all of these idols become obsolete. So what actually happened is, if his message was to spread, Makkah, what would be the significance? Because all of the idols that came from all the different parts of Arabia, with their wealth, with their trade, with their people, they wouldn't come anymore, right? The sacrifices that were made to the idols and everything else in society would be disrupted. So his message, not only one was a message that was going to not bring him any financial gain or power, because he's going against society, it was challenging the status quo of the society in such a way that it threatened his own life. In fact, he was verbally attacked, physically attacked, and they wanted to kill him, and they tried to kill him. They offered him, we're going to give you the political power, we're going to give you whichever woman of the city you want, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you that, wealth, whatever. Just give up this message, nothing else. Just give up this message, Muhammad. That's what they wanted him to do.
So when the Prophet ﷺ started preaching, the first thing they do, they appeal to Abu Talib. And they went to him gently and they said, "Oh Abu Talib, this is your nephew cursing our idols, preaching a message that is different than our forefathers. Surely you cannot let this happen." Few weeks later, they come to Abu Talib again. And as more and more people are converting, as more and more of the Hujjaj go back bearing the news that there's a man in Mecca preaching a new message, they realize that action has to be taken. And so they increase the pressure on Abu Talib. The first thing that they do is they try to threaten him. They try to bribe him. They try to cajole him. They say to him, "We cannot take this anymore. Your nephew is insulting our forefathers." The Prophet ﷺ did not curse their forefathers. It's his own forefathers, right? But what is he saying? Tawheed. So they take 1 + 1 and they make 20 out of it. He's preaching Tawheed. And he's saying idolatry is not a good way, it's foolish. And so they say, "We cannot bear this anymore. You either stop him from preaching yourself, or you hand him over to us, and we do as we please. One of the two, we give you two options. You either stop him yourself or you hand him over to us." And Abu Talib had never been confronted by his people in this manner. And Abu Talib had never been opposed in this manner. That every single member of the tribe is coming and saying, "You have one of two options." And so this is when he went to the Prophet ﷺ, the famous story, all of you know it. And he called his nephew, the Prophet ﷺ, and he said to him, "Oh my nephew, my people have come to me and they have said such and such. So be merciful to you and be merciful to me. Have some mercy on me and do not place me in a situation that I cannot bear." And this is one of the most difficult and traumatic encounters of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Abu Talib loved the Prophet ﷺ more than he loved his own children. And it was the son of his own full brother Abdullah. And here is when the Prophet ﷺ himself became overwhelmed with emotion. And he said that famous statement that, "Oh my uncle, wallahi, if they were to give me the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left hand, wallahi, I could not give up this message until I succeed in what I'm doing, or I die a death in this path preaching what I am preaching." And then of course there's a symbolism here. Even if they were to give me something that is beyond this world, forget money, forget wealth, forget fame, even if they were to give me something beyond this world, the sun and the moon, I could not give up what I am doing until I meet my death or I succeed in my message. And when Abu Talib saw this persistence, he saw in the eyes of the Prophet ﷺ that passion, that sincerity, he said to him, "Do what you will, my nephew, فَوَاللَّهِ I will never come to you again to stop what you're doing." And he lived up to his word. No matter what the Quraysh did, no matter what they did, he never once came back to reprimand his nephew.
In fact, while he was being attacked, while his followers were being killed and tortured, and even while he knew that some of his countrymen were conspiring to murder him, at that very time the Prophet ﷺ was holding a trust in his home, a trust they had given to him, a trust of money, a trust of valuables that they had given to him, because in Mecca, where he was born, he was known as Al-Amin, the most trustworthy. And Al-Amin, even though his enemies had stole from his followers, killed his followers, tortured his followers, confiscated their properties, he could have done what others do in warfare. He could have then confiscated their wealth that he was holding. But when they entered his home to kill him, they did not find him there. Instead, they found his cousin Ali radiallahu anhu, and he left Ali in his house when he escaped for only one reason, so that Ali radiallahu anhu could give back to them the valuables, the money that they had entrusted with him years ago. Can you imagine a man who is hated for his message, opposed for his message, sought to be killed, yet those people who hated the message and sought to kill him, they never thought to come and say, give us back our money, because still they trusted him, because they knew there was no one with more trust in Mecca than Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, never in his life did he ever lift his hand to hit any human being, ever. Not a servant, not a wife, not a child, not a friend, nor an enemy, except when that enemy was opposing Allah and opposing the message. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam never drank alcohol throughout his life, although